Today we are on lesson 20 and we are going to learn how to factor by grouping. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a couple steps that I want you to write down, and what we'll do is we'll do example 1 as we write the steps, so that way it's pretty clear on which step means what, and you can always pause and rewind if you need more time. So the first thing is we always want to start with a 4-termed polynomial. So if I look at example 1, is 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So when I see 4 terms, that tells me that I can use the factoring method called grouping. It is similar to the GCF method we've been practicing, but a little bit different. So we have to start with a 4-term polynomial. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to group the terms. Now, when you think of a group, you think of putting things together. So what we're going to do is we're going to put parentheses around the first and the second term, and then we're going to put parentheses around the third and the fourth term. So when I go and do that on number 1, my first and second term are right here. So I'm going to put a parentheses in front of it, and then right after the square, I'm going to put a parentheses because that's the first two. And then 3 and 4, 3 has this plus sign, so I have to get the plus sign in it, and then I'm going to close it out here. So notice every sign, every number, every variable, and every exponent is inside of a group. So there's your step 1. Step 2 is to use what we've been practicing, and you factor out the GCF from both groups. Okay, so if we think about the first one, let's do one at a time. Technically, there's a 1 right here. So my factors of 1 are 1 and 1. And the x's, I have 3 x's. 1, 2, 3, because I have x to the third power. Okay, my factors of 6 are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. And this time, I only have 2 x's. So if I look at the greatest number they have in common is 1. That means I'm not going to use 2 and 3, so I can cross them off. And the smallest amount of x's, this has 3, but this has 2. So I can have 2 here, so I can have 2 here. So now I look, I have a 1 and 2 x's circled, a 1 and 2 x's. So I match. So that's my GCF from this first group. So now I need to figure out what's left by dividing or looking at what's left. So 1 divided by 1, right, is 1. There's 2 x's I circled. I had 3 x's, I took out 2, so I have 1 x left. And if I look here, I have 1 and an x. Okay, minus 6 divided by 1, negative 6 divided by 1, either way you want to think about it, right, is 6, which is still here. And I don't have any x's left because I had 2 and I took out 2. There's none hanging out, so that's the end of my parentheses. My parentheses is a little stretched out, but that's okay. Now I'm going to do this again with this side. So I'm going to say, okay, factors of 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and I have an x. 60, 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 10, sorry, 6 and 10, 3 and 20 is the one that I just messed up. Okay, so I look at my list. The greatest common factor is 10. I know that none of these are going to work because they're too big, right? 30, 20, 10, 60 aren't even on 10's list. So there's 10, and there's no x's. So I have 10's, and here's an x, and there's no x's here, so no x's. That means the only thing on the outside of this parentheses is a 10. Okay, so now we figure out what's left. 10 divided by 10, I didn't use this one, so I have 1 and an x. Negative 60 divided by 10 is negative 6, and if I look, that's the only thing left here, negative 6. So what you should notice right now is you should be like, whoa, inside my parentheses is the same thing here and here. So step 3 is what I call the 2 for 1 special. If you do grouping correctly, inside of your parentheses will match. That's why I call it a 2-for-1 special, because you get 2 of them the same. Okay, so step 4 is to write your factors. So there's 2 factors here. One is the 2-for-1 special. The other is from the GCFs. So what I mean by that is this 2-for-1 special, 1x minus 6, I write that as one of my answers, 1x minus 6. That's one of my factors. But I only write it once because it's a 2-for-1. So I only get it once. My other factor comes from what I had as my GCFs. So this GCF was 1x squared, and this GCF was 10, and it was a positive. So I put them together in 1. This is my factored form of this polynomial. So we're going to look at example 2, and we're going to follow those same steps that you have above, so make sure to reference them. So I have a 4-term polynomial, so I'm going to group the first term and the second term and the third term and the fourth term, and I'm going to get all the signs in between. Okay, so now we're going to just go right underneath it, and we're going to list our factors. So we have 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and 2 y's. Under 9, we have 1 and 9, 3 and 3, and a y. So I look for my greatest common factor. My greatest common number is 3. That means the other factors I can cross off. And my most y's is 1. So you should have the same thing circled under each monomial. That means 3y is my GCF. So I figure out what's left. So I can do 6 divided by 3. I can say 3 times what gives me 6? It's 2. And I have a y, but I had 2 y's, so I need another y. And right here, I have a 2y not circled. Okay, I do it again. 9 divided by 3, or 3 times what gives me 9? It's 3. And I don't have any y's left, and it was a positive because I have to get a positive up here. So if I did this right, and I do this one right, I should get 2y plus 3 in this parentheses too. So let's see if we get it. Factors of 4, 1 and 4, 2 and 2, and I have an x, and I have a y. Factors of 6, we did them over here. 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and I have an x. So my greatest common factor is 2. These cancel. And what do I have in common? I have in common an x and an x, but here I have a y, but I don't have a y here. So I circled the same stuff, 2x. So that's what goes on the outside of my parentheses, and I figure out what goes inside. Well, what's left here? 2y. Let's see why. 4 divided by 2 is 2. I have an x here, so I don't have any here, but there's a y missing, so I bring down the y. Okay, let's see what's left here. We have a positive, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, and I have a 3 only hanging out here. I have no variables hanging out here. And look at that, I got my 2-for-1 special, right? 2y plus 3, 2y plus 3. So that is one of my factors, my 2-for-1 special. And then you should be thinking, okay, what's the other factor? Remember, the other factor comes from putting the GCFs in a parentheses. So 3y is first, and 2x is second, and there was a plus sign in between. So there's my factored form of that polynomial. Okay, we're going to do 2 more examples. So example 3, we're going to start the same. Step 1 says group terms 1 and 2. So I'll group 1 and 2, and I'll group 3 and 4. This time you notice there's a negative sign here. That's going to make a difference. Okay, here we go. Let's do our factors. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And this time I have 3 n's. So this one has the most we've had in a while. Oh, but then we only have 2, so that's just 1 and 2. There's no other factors, and I have 2 n's. So when I look for my greatest common factor, my biggest number is just 2. So these cross off, these cross off. And my smallest n's is 2, so I can circle 2 here and 2 here. So I have the same thing circled, so that's what goes on the outside, 2n to the second. Okay, and let's look at what's left. I have a 6 and I have an n, so let's see why. 12 divided by 2 is 6. I had 3 n's, but I only have 2 out here, so I need 1 more. That's why that's what's left. Okay, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and n2 and n2, so I don't have any n's, but this time it's a -2, so this one is a -1. So let's hope we get the same thing in this parentheses to get our 2 for 1 special. So let's do 42. So 1 and 42, 2 and 21, and 6 and 7. And we have an n. And this one is just 7. 7 is prime. It only has 1 in itself. So our greatest number here this time is 7. So I don't need this one. I don't need that one. So the only thing I can put outside here is 7. Now here is the caveat. That means like here is something new for you. There's a negative sign here. When there is a negative in front of spot 3, you have to put a negative outside. So the negative goes with the GCF. So instead of just putting 7 out here, I'm going to put -7. Now this is where our signs are going to be a little weird, but that's okay. So now when I'm doing -42 divided by -7, I get a +6, and I still have an n. But when I do 7 divided by -7, I have a -1. If I didn't take the negative out here, the signs would all be different in here, and I would not get a 2 for 1 special. So when there is a negative in front, the number in the front of the parentheses, it could be in spot 1, 2. You have to put it with the GCF. Okay, so that negative went right here. So you have to be careful. So now I make my 2 for 1 special, which is 6n minus 1. And then I take my GCFs, and I have these, and now this one looks different because of that subtraction. So I have 2n squared, and instead of plus like we've been doing, it's -7 because I had a -7. And there's that one. Okay, the last problem is going to be pretty simple because there's not that many numbers. So remember, when there's no numbers, it's a 1. So that one needs a 1. We could put a 1 here. Okay, so it looks like that. Okay, so let's do our factors. 1 and 1, x and x. 1 and 4. Now I could write 2 and 2, but 2 is not over here. So you can start to shortcut. And then I have x and z. So the biggest number is 1. And the biggest letter, well, this doesn't have any z's, so I can't do z's, but there is an x in common. So now I'll have a 1x on the outside. And then I can just look and see what's left. Well, there's a 1x here. Be careful though, this is a subtraction, and there's a 4z here. And this is going to look the same, 1 and 1, but this time x and y. And this one, 1 and 4, and y and z. So my number is still 1. But letters, x, there isn't one. Y, 1, there's one over here. Z, there isn't one over here. So now I have a 1y. So then I figure out what's left, a 1x, a minus, and a 4z. So I got my 2 for 1 special. So I'm going to write that once, 1x minus 4z. And then I'm going to use what my GCFs are here and here. So I have a 1x plus, because that's positive, 1y. Oops, sorry you couldn't see it. So that is my final answer for that one.